co-chair of the Vision 2030 process on coastal resilience. Nadia, what is your take on this?
Thank you very much, Julian, and happy afternoon, morning, evening to everybody. It's really taking the amount of attention that finally the ocean and the ocean decade is having. As Julian started to say, and Vera before me, we have been working in the past 4 years around the 10-decade challenges that really overview the importance of the ocean for humanity. And these 10-decade challenges have arrived at the Barcelona conference with the aim of enlarging even more the consultation with all the stakeholders. As Julian was saying, this is the decade where science meets the users, the stakeholders, the practical impact of science. All the 10 challenges have at their heart the concept of actionable science that considers co-design of knowledge with stakeholders and the need for extended capacity enhancement in ocean science and data sharing. One of the Barcelona Statement priorities for science generation focuses on the science required to increase resilience to ocean and coastal hazards for coastal communities. Such science will underpin adaptive governance for the assessment and management of risk to coastal communities and the coastal blue economy. The Vision 2030 paper that I had the privilege to chair or to lead the writing with Dr. Srinivas Kumar from the Decade Collaborative Center of the Indian Ocean region, tackles the problem of coastal resilience, hopefully in an innovative way, and defines pathways for strengthening coastal resilience as never before. The Vision 2030 paper accepts the definition of resilience of the coast as a self-organizing capacity to preserve actual and potential functions of coastal ecosystems under the influence of changing conditions. And these changing conditions are clearly climate change, but not only. Other human activities. Success for this to arrive at innovative solutions will hinge on addressing critical gaps in scientific understanding and knowledge, in risk assessment and risk reduction, reorientate our discussion to risk assessment and risk reduction, in addition to putting in place robust and adaptive institutional mechanism for implanting novel solutions that contributed to coastal resilience. Some key elements to be addressed in this context that the Vision 2030 paper tries to highlight is, first of all, gathering and generating observational and modeling data sets relevant for risk assessment, including downscaled climate scenarios for coastal regions. Promoting interdisciplinary and international research and innovation to tackle challenges comprehensively, and fostering partnerships at different scales involving local communities, public and private, disaster risk reduction entities, governmental bodies, and academic institutions. To conclude, two are the major outcomes foreseen for the decade for coastal resilience. The first is the design of people-centered, multi-hazard early warning systems. The second, design adaptation planning strategies to increase coastal resilience using the transformative science out of programs projects of the decade. Many of the program projects of the decade already contribute to give new avenues for adaptation planning. And to conclude, really, 3 are the major recommendations out of the Vision 2030 paper: developing an open and accessible system for risk assessment and management, integrating coastal resilience targets into SDGs in a way that hasn't been done yet, initiating a process of coastal resilience review of requirements that is needed to check on the effectiveness of our solutions. The science of coastal resilience should be probably one of the key topics to be highlighted at the One Ocean Science Conference of June 2025. And then from there, connect to the UNOC policymakers, the new view coming out of the ocean decade. Let's go there all together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia. And of course, what you said resonates also very well with one of a special event that will be organized on the margin of UNOC, which is focusing on the coalition of coastal cities with a focus on resilience. So I have maybe one very quick questions to both of you, to Vera and Nadia, and that's really, for you, what are some of the key, let's say maybe go with one, enabling factor that really we need to put in place for some of those priorities you have defined to actually be delivered. So if you could try, please, to answer this within 1 minute each, and then we'll go to Jorge Cortes Nunes. Vera.
Okay, I'll start. So briefly, I'm going to go back to the word partnerships, which was highlighted in the opening. I really think that we need to enhance partnerships, and there's 2 particular types of partnership that we saw as a working group needed a lot more work. One was with actors from emerging nations. I'm going to call them, often they're referred to as the Global South, but I like to use emerging nations. And the other one is partnerships with the private sector. Currently, the center of gravity is certainly for the decade, but I would say science in general is on global north leadership. So we need stronger institutional partnerships, capacity development, and overall leadership under the decade should be shifted towards emerging nations. There's also a lot of opportunities to engage better with the private sector that we have not harnessed enough. So I certainly hope that the conference, the pre-science conference and the conference would be places where that are structured in a way to facilitate these kind of partnerships.
Wonderful, great, thank you, Vera. Nadia, what's your take on this? What would be your key recommendation?
Yeah, thank you very much. In addition to partnerships that Vera already said, which is also a very important priority, is interdisciplinary and cross-sectoral science and collaboration, integrated approaches, stakeholder engagement in the phases of definition of the solutions for coastal resilience and more, and capacity building. Capacity building requires, which is, I would say now, in a more modern way, is capacity enhancement that should really be enlarged with all the new science that the decade is already developing. And so new training programs and institutional also strengthening. Last but not least, I would put as another priority the effective knowledge exchange through data availability and management. We have to have a stepwise enhancement of data availability and management. Vera said for the Global South in general, but also for many private and public institutions that still do not use the wealth of data that the decade is producing and will produce more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia and Vera. And of course, to our audience, you can see some of the depth and the richness of the discussions within some of those working groups. I remind you that we have 10 working groups that have delivered white papers, and those are available on the Ocean Decade website, including through the outcome report. So now let me again thank you and move maybe to our last speaker for this first panel, and this is Professor Jorge Cortes Nunez, who is with University of Costa Rica, CIMAR, and also a member of the One Ocean Science Conference Scientific Committee, who will be taking place in a year from now. So Costa Rica is just having completed a very successful meeting a week ago, where many of us were there in San Jose, the Immersed in Change meeting. I want to ask Jorge, what is his perspective in terms of advancing ocean science, particularly in the global south, through international collaboration. So if you could give us your views within 2 to 3 minutes, that would be very much welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Yeah, as a person coming from a developing country, I would like to touch on several points that were mentioned before. And it's that people from our countries many times are invited to oceanographic expedition observers. But in many of our countries, we have the capabilities of not being just observers, but co-investigators. And I insist that we should be part of not only coming into a project that it's been already formulated, but start from the very beginning as being part of the formulation of these projects. The other point I want to make is that more scientists and students from these countries must participate in expeditions when they're done in our countries. Normally, either we're not invited or one or two as observers. And many of these countries in the South, as it's been called, have scientists that have studied in the North and have their own ideas and projects that they could develop. Another point that I've been insisting also, and echoed by other people, is that the samples should stay in the countries, and hopefully there are facilities in these countries to store those samples. What's been the norm is that all samples go to museums in the developed countries, and then we have to go there to see samples from our country. And what we're pushing for is that the samples stay in the country and instead bring specialists to the countries to work on those samples and influence and motivate and teach people from these countries. And finally, touching on a point that was mentioned before, we need more capacity sharing, not capacity building. And as I mentioned, in many of our countries, we have people that know what they're doing and what needs to be done in their country. So we need more capacity sharing or capacity enhancement, as was mentioned. But this sense of capacity building, at least for me, gives this idea that we don't know what we're doing, and we need to have people coming from the North to tell us what to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jorge, for highlighting some of the challenges that we have in the emerging countries to conduct science, and also laying out some, I think, very important core principles for collaboration amongst the countries. Certainly, this is an area of focus within the decade that we are trying to facilitate. So I want to thank our panel here. I also want to highlight, of course, the work that we initiated and that was presented in Barcelona, and you saw a glimpse of that today. Of course, doesn't stop in Barcelona, and the priorities that have been identified now really needs to be translated in a global, but also a regional and national framework. And this is where the process of UNOC will be very important for us to really ensure that also policymakers understand the type of investments that are required to deliver the knowledge at various levels. So certainly, I think a key message to pass on to the next panel, who will also certainly address the issue of science and how we bring science into UNOC, but more importantly, how we come out of UNOC with very strong commitments and partnerships around science. So it's my pleasure now to transition towards my colleague, Alison Clausen, Deputy Coordinator for VDCAID, for the next panel. Over to you, Alison.
Great, thanks, Julian, and nice to be here. Just to know that there are quite a few Q&A in the Q&A box. So if I'm particularly aimed at the panelists and the speakers who just spoke. So Vera, Jorge, and Nadia, if you feel inclined, I'm sure some of our spectators would be very happy to have your written answers. We will try and take some questions at the end if we have time, but we always know we're always very pressed for time. Anyway, moving on to the next panel, which is really trying to look at some of the expectations from the United Nations Ocean Conference and the special event that we've been hearing about that is going to precede that, which is the One Ocean Science Congress. And as we've just heard, the outcomes of the Barcelona conference really, they were based on a very strong process, but they do provide a strong basis for further discussion, further collaboration on global science and knowledge priorities. And this is where, as we continue along this road from Barcelona to Nice, we have this incredible opportunity next year of the One Ocean Science Congress, which will precede the more formal United Nations Ocean Conference the days afterwards. So the One Ocean Science Congress will be held in Nice from the 4th to 6th of June. We have the pleasure of having the two co-chairs of this Congress who are going to speak to us a little bit more about what is planned and how we can continue to build on what was discussed in Barcelona. The Congress is really aiming to generate and share comprehensive scientific insights on the health of the ocean, but also explore some of the further scenarios. So we'll build on that work from the Ocean Decade, but also other sources such as IPCC, IPBES, the World Ocean Assessment, the comprehensive work of the Ocean Panel, with the aim of formulating these science-based recommendations to heads of state, governments, and indeed all the participants at the United Nations Ocean Conference, looking at the role of the ocean to achieve sustainable development, and also, and we've already heard this touched on in the previous panel, but strengthening the arguments for increased and sustained investment for ocean science and knowledge. So with these aims, the Congress is really a natural evolution from many of the discussions that have been happening even earlier than Barcelona, from Brest and even before that onwards. And what we're going to do in this panel now is going to build on what was just discussed more specifically on Barcelona, but really try and focus on some of the key topics that are going to be identified as or discussed at the One Ocean Science Congress. And our panelists are going to give their insights on key issues or themes that they expect to be discussed in these, and then some of their perspectives on their expectations of what they would like to see emerge, both from the One Ocean Science Congress and the United Nations Ocean Conference that will follow it. But first, before we get there, let's start